Hi everyone, Blender 4.2 is now available, and as usual we're going to do a bit of a breakdown video where we take a look at the new features page and just talk a bit through the stuff you'll be able to get your hands on, as well as some pretty big changes. Now before doing this video I put a couple of posts out on the YouTube community feed and on my Twitter asking people what they thought of the update so far, and the reactions have been a bit mixed, I think because there's quite a lot going on in this update. In particular there's like a new extensions platform that's integrated into the software to make it easy to update add-ons, and EEVEE Next is available now, which is pretty much a rewrite of the EEVEE real-time rendering engine, the rasterization engine. But obviously when there are big changes, there are going to be some compatibility issues. So let's take a little look through the feature page. So the splash screen for this version, I believe, is from the new but kind of cancelled short film project from the Blender Studio. I believe this was the one referred to as Project Gold, which they've scaled back on, but I believe they're making some files available to Blender Studio subscribers. And as usual, whenever they do these updates, there are a couple of videos going over the features. This showcase reel is a really nice one because it shows you kind of highlights from people in the community showing cool demos they've made with some of the new features. In particular, I've seen some really cool ones with the Ray Portal node, which basically in the shader editor allows you to take information from elsewhere in the scene visually, so you can get all kinds of really interesting VFX with that. First of all, obviously EEVEE Next is one of the biggest things in this update. EEVEE as a rendering engine was quite a game changer for Blender in the way that it allowed for kind of PBR visualization in real time. Really great for like bridging stuff like game development pipelines with the software, but EEVEE was very limited in certain regards, in particular for displacement, which if you look down here, got a little bit of a preview showing that displacement is now possible. Additionally, global illumination. So in Cycles, we're obviously so used to realistic bounce lighting happening because it's a path traced engine. So that's at its fundamental level simulated from the very beginning, but EEVEE never really had that, or it only had it in the form of add-ons that other people had written. So now with EEVEE Next, there's integrated support for screen space global illumination. And if I just open this up here, we'll be able to see how this works. With the enabling of the ray tracing option, things should dynamically adapt. Now, since it is still screen space, there are going to be some limitations when compared to Cycles, but it's still an important step in realism. And also we're trying to give people more artistic control with EEVEE in terms of lighting. On my side of things, obviously I just released a massive new product, Afterglow, which is a lighting focused product for Cycles. I recommend you check it out if you want to see. It's going to be interesting for me to sit down and see how much of this, if any, is compatible with this new screen space system. So I'll try and set aside some time to do that because it'll be an interesting thing to play with. So real displacement is now supported by EEVEE, and just like in Cycles, if you set your materials to displacement and bump, it will combine true displacement and bump mapping for finer details. So this is good because it means there's some interoperability between the material settings, between the rendering engines. So again, it kind of helps us to get a bit more realism, although displacement is not just about realism, it just kind of increases the number of visual effects we'll be able to get with material surfaces. So superb scattering. Subsurface scattering now doesn't leak between objects and has no energy loss. We can see a comparison between on the left, the last version 4.1 and the new 4.2. The subsurface translucency is now always computed and the associated option has been removed. I think the largest places for the comparison are around the top of the creature here, underneath the other object. It's just far more consistent in 4.2 now, so it seems like a much more stable effect. Turn up the volume. Divid volumetrics provide a much more stable result while navigating the scene. So this is something that was always quite jarring to us who did like the old nebula effects that became quite popular in Blender when 2.8 came out. The cards type rendering for EEVEE was always a bit of a disappointment when we're trying to do complex volumetric effects, so anything to help blend that together or make it less noticeable is definitely a good thing. Blurry vision. Motion blur is now visible in the 3D viewport through the camera view and supports a custom shutter curve matching Cycles. Now that's pretty cool. And again, more important for if you're doing animated type renders, so you don't have to render out the whole thing before you can actually visualize how strong the motion blur is going to be. So I think that's a pretty cool implementation. And as always, there's more than what they just show in these highlights. So let's just quickly read these out. Virtual shadow maps, unlimited BSDFs. Wait, what does that mean? Unlimited BSDFs. Was there a limit before? I didn't know that. New transparent shadows option, unlimited number of lights. Lights now support ray visibility options. Oh, fantastic. So that is important. Again, going back to Cycles and my Afterglow project. Ray visibility gives you a lot of artistic control over what types of objects are affected by the lights, or rather the passes. So are the shadows going to be visible? Is it going to affect diffuse or glossy surfaces? Stuff like that. So it's basically just more light control. Multi-threaded shader compilation, so that should speed up the preparation of your shaders when they're being seen in the viewport. Refined user interface, shadow shadow map ray tracing, nice. Lights are now visible through refractive surfaces. Glossy lighting no longer leaks at the back of objects. Better quality depth of field. New backface culling option for shadows. A materials divored render method. Thickness output. Improved blended materials. Ray trace transmission now affects all BSDF nodes. And better image stability. And as I alluded to at the beginning of this video, some people have had some trouble with converting their projects from previous versions to this new version. You're going to have to take a look at your previous EEVEE projects because there may be some things you have to tweak. I think they're aware of that here. As we can see, migration plan, even though conversion to the new EEVEE happens automatically and most things should just work. Hi, Todd Howard. Some adjustments are required for a smooth transition. And if you click through on the updating to the new EEVEE button, there's a bit more information about the specific changes. So if you are having trouble migrating between the two softwares, specifically migrating your projects between them, then this might be worth a read. Also, there's a page for limitations. So taking a look at that here, a useful documentation page. So that's EEVEE related stuff. Now we've got cycles related stuff. Nice to see that it's not being left behind. So magical, prettier, smoother, faster. Cycles got a massive upgrade to make your renders not only look better, but also render faster. It's a kind of magic. All right, so ray travel. The new ray Portal BSDF transports rays to another location in the scene with a specified ray position and normal, so direction. It can be used to render portals for visual effects, such as with this CCTV-like screen, and also actual portals, so you'll be able to do portal effects very easily, and other production rendering tricks. So again, as I mentioned, there have been a lot of community demonstrations of this. The showcase video that we noted at the top of the page and on the official Blender channel will show some of these demos, but if you want to read up a bit more about the nodes specifically, then again, they have a documentation page for this. So I appreciate that they take the time to actually make these for people. Next up, thin film interference. The principled BSDF now supports physically accurate thin film interference effects for specular reflection and transmission. Initially, this is only applied to dielectric materials, and support for metallic thin film effects is planned. So thin film is an effect that people find quite popular, and there are all different kinds of resources in the community that are attempts to add thin film interference and related effects to Blender. So in particular, I'm thinking about Smouse's effects. They have a series of products and resources which are pretty good, but it's nice to see that some of these effects will be supported natively in Blender, and from the sounds of it, they're going to be extending it a bit in the future as well. So soft volumes. Blender 4.2 is your go-to for rendering volumes with improved volume light sampling that delivers smoother results for spotlights and area lights. So that's good. I don't always use lamp objects, but it's nice to know that when I do now, it's going to have a more refined and directed sampling. So they should reduce the total number of samples you need to actually render your frames, and in turn reduce the amount of time to render. Additionally, there's some new blue noise that's been added. So blue noise differed sampling will improve the visual quality of renders. So here's a before and after. This mainly helps when setting the maximum number of samples to a low number and for interactive viewport renders. So the blue noise should assist with the denoising process by helping it to be more accurate with fewer samples. That's my understanding anyway. New files use this mode by default, while existing files can be changed in the sampling advanced panel. So basically it's just a new noise sampling method that should be more functional for us. So more for cycles, upgraded to Open Image Denoise 2.3 for improved quality, so better denoising, which is great. New world override option for view layers, new roughness input in subsurface scattering node. Intel GPU rendering now supports host memory fallback. Motion blur settings are now shared with EEVEE. That makes sense given the new EEVEE viewport previews for motion blur. GPU accelerated denoising support for AMD GPUs on Windows and Linux. Reduced Blender installation size due to GPU kernel compression. So that's nice. That's a good thing for everyone. GPU accelerated denoising supported on CPU renders, and principled hair with the Huang model provides better close-up renders. So the next big milestone feature here is the extensions platform. Now the way this works is that add-on developers have to slightly adjust how they package add-ons and then have them uploaded to the extensions platform, and from there people can drag them into Blender or manage them from inside of Blender, where it will auto-detect and they can then download updates that the add-on developers have pushed to the platform. So it's basically like an integrated version management for add-ons, so you don't have to keep re-downloading them off of Gumroad and Blender Market. But obviously this only applies to add-ons which add-on developers have put on the platform, and not every add-on developer will do that because it depends on what the add-on is. I need to look into this. I did get an email from, I think it was Delay from Blender, asking if I wanted to give it a try. At the point in time when I got that email, I was going through some things. Eye problem, if you know, you know. So again, I haven't really sat down with this yet, but I do remember on Twitter there was a little bit of controversy about the interface changes and the user preferences, about it changing a bit too much and a bit of weird wording. You can still install old add-ons. You don't have to use this new platform, but they're called legacy add-ons instead. So let's just take a quick read through it. So easy install. Getting extensions has never been this easy. You can drag and drop from websites such as extensions.blender.org, bundle them in production or educational environments. There is support for legacy add-ons, as I mentioned, and you can install from disk. So the difference between these two, legacy add-ons are add-ons as we know them that haven't been made compatible with the extensions platform, and installing from disk is where you have extension add-ons, so add-ons which have been made compatible, but you just haven't got them from online. That might sound a bit confusing. Basically, there are two types of add-ons now, old and new ones. Both still work with Blender, but only one of them is compatible with the extensions platform. At least that's my understanding. Well, that's how it was explained to me on Twitter. Stay up to date. Extension repositories can check for updates automatically on startup. This can be disabled on a per repository basis, and this works offline, so don't worry. Blender isn't suddenly going all DRM and weird. Internet access is fully optional and off by default. You can always install extensions manually via install from disk, or drag and drop the zip file into Blender, or by using system extensions repositories. So the extensions platform is an ever-growing hub of community-made free and open source extensions for Blender, and it comes in the form of a new website which you can browse at your own leisure and easily install. And there's a community review and approval process behind it as well, so it might be worth taking a little look. Let's just go there now. Here we go, the Blender extensions website. So there's the opportunity to leave reviews for the add-ons that you find useful. It also supports themes as well. I do have my own theme for Blender that I call Steel, because it's very, very faintly blue. It's a darker gray and slightly blue in some areas. Maybe that's something I could add to this over time. Nice to see loop tools here as well. And it looks like there's also a queue of add-ons that need to be reviewed. So this is not something that I imagine every add-on developer will make use of. Also, from the looks of it, some things have been waiting for review for quite a long time, 3 months or so. So managing extensions. Extensions can be managed from the preferences window. Search, install, uninstall, check for updates. And here's an example of dragging and dropping from a website into Blender. Seems pretty easy and convenient. Now, with every update, they always have some kind of section which makes reference to either being studio friendly or being compliant with certain pipelines. In particular, in this version, because it's a LTS version, so long-term support, it helps companies that have very refined standards in their pipelines to feel more confident about jumping to this version. So this section is very interesting for me. Because it's all about tone mapping and color for your renders, particularly for those of us that like the AGX color space. So Kronos PBR neutral tone mapper. The recently released tone mapper by Kronos, aimed at displaying true to life assets, is now built into Blender. So standard is what our renders used to look like. And obviously with a lot of emissive light, particularly highly saturated emissive light, we weren't really preserving lighting values properly. And then AGX came along, which was far more balanced with that, but it had the downside of making things feel a bit less vibrant. So the Kronos PBR kind of adds some of that vibrance back in. So a bit of a comparison between standard, again, we've lost a lot of that light value, and then the Kronos, we're maintaining it. So we're basically just trying to find that perfect point, and I feel like this is going to be great for renders going forward. Kronos PBR Neutral enables faithful reproduction of a product space color, hue, and saturation when using PBR rendering under grayscale lighting, while eliminating HDR artifacts around highlights. So I have to give that a try and see how it works. And if you take a look on the Kronos page here, this is the official website. You can take a little look at the theory. So now more in the side of modeling tools. It's always great to see more modeling tools. It's an area that's been a little bit, I was going to say abandoned, but we haven't had much improvement in terms of modeling tools for a while. So Polyline joins the family of gestures, lasso, boxed line, allowing for a quick way to create polygonal shapes. So you can see an example here, quickly drawing shapes in space. I think that's going to be very handy. And this is a demo of the Polyline trim tool used to create Boolean operations that can add or remove geometry. And this reminds me a bit of 3D Coat as well. 3D Coat has a really powerful sculpting tool set, but it allows for this kind of lasso type creation that automatically cuts or grows geometry wherever you like. This kind of thing is very, very cool for like concepting shapes quickly. So complete tool set. Additionally, the line gesture is now supported for trim, face set, and hide. So yeah, it should be useful. Okay, next up, enter the matrix. A whole new socket type for matrices makes it easier than ever to work with transformations using nodes. And this lays the groundwork for future geometry nodes with advanced custom geometry operations. The new socket type comes alongside a wide range of new nodes, as well as integration into existing ones. You know, geometry nodes is something I haven't played with for a little while. I was always kind of waiting for it to develop a bit further and stabilize before diving back into making tools for it. Recently, Blender has been doing a bit of an outreach phase, should we say, speaking to kind of higher level geometry nodes creators in the community, asking them for their feedback on what kind of direction it should take. Now, we collectively as creators in the community haven't always been seeing eye to eye with Blender's philosophy on geometry nodes, but now that they're doing some outreach, hopefully it's going to be moving in a more productive direction. Nice of them as well. You can also download this demo project if you want to learn a bit more about how this new socket type will be useful for GeoNodes, and we have pictures of them here as well. Point and shoot. Node tools are becoming more and more interactive. It's now possible to use information about the viewport and mouse position in the node tree. Together with the new wait for click feature, this lets you control exactly where the tool will take effect. Now this is leaning a bit more into the visual scripting side of node tools. I really like this demo because as you can see where they're clicking on the face, that is basically giving us information for the geometry nodes tree to construct this fracture effect. Very cool. This will be very high level stuff as well. Well, this doesn't have to be high level, but it will allow for really complex tools to be made. Again, if they keep developing the capabilities of geometry nodes, this will allow for a lot of really advanced parametric modeling effects and other useful workflow tools. So viewport transform and mouse position are going to be really super useful pieces of information to use for node tools. I mean, you can just imagine that being able to do anything you like wherever the artist puts their cursor on the screen. It's brilliant. So more geometry nodes, the scale elements node is now 4 to 10 times faster, sample UV surface is now 10 to 20 times faster on large meshes, multi-threading optimizations, and there are more smaller changes. That's not the end of the features, but they put it here, so I will mention it. You can donate to Blender to help keep the development going, and yes, I do donate to Blender. Again, email every month when they suck money out of my account, but it's worth it though, because the way I like to think about it isn't that you're necessarily donating to them. I like to imagine the Blender development team is my team, and I'm just paying them like 20 something dollars, pounds, euros a month to do all of this work for me, because Blender belongs to everyone and you can customize it any way you like. I like to imagine it as being my personal software, and it's only costing me 20 odd pounds a month at this point for them to develop it for me. When I think about it in that way, it's definitely worth it. I mean, it would be worth a lot more. If I was rich, I would definitely give more, but I've got other responsibilities as well. But I definitely encourage you to, if you are able to. But remember that contributing to Blender and the Blender community is more than just giving money. Using the software, just having fun with it, testing its capabilities, and if you work with it, seeing how far you can push it in professional environments and then sharing that knowledge with others, that's also a perfectly viable way of contributing to the Blender ecosystem. So now for the video sequencer, something which for a very long time was not receiving much love. It has now in recent versions been getting a little bit of attention. So beauty all around. Strips are now rendered using a shader with rounded corners, making it easy to see at a glance where a strip ends and a new one begins. Just a little UX improvement. Active and selected strips have thicker outlines and an extra dark edge around them to improve contrast. Look mum, no handles! Speed up your editing by clicking the size of a strip to tweak it. You can also click between two strips to adjust both simultaneously. Maybe one day Blender will be a viable video editor. We're actually saying that, I know that's going to be controversial. People are going to be telling me that it is, but I can't swap to it for my video editing workflow yet. That's not really something that Blender is trying to do, but the video sequence editor is really, really useful and important for preparing, chopping up animated sequences and getting that output. Visible handles can be brought back from preferences, editing, and video sequencer. Strips that reference missing source files or scenes are now highlighted in red and use iconography, making them easy to spot so you'll know at a glance if anything's missing. And the text strip has received a number of improvements for tweaking the shadow offset, angle, blur size, and a new outline option. Lovely. And for the sequencer, several performance improvements, a new operator, frame, scene range, and preview range. Preview, Luma waveform separate colors replaced by RGB parade scope. The overlays popover has been reorganized for clarity, support for dragging and dropping multiple files. Waveforms are now half size by default, and a new cache line overlay. And again, another one of these Studio Confidence banners. Python 3.11, OpenEXR 3.2, Open Color IO, Open Subdiv, and more. Blender 4.2 LTS is fully aligned with the VFX Reference Platform 2024, which is basically like a standard to comply to, making it easier to integrate and maintain in Studio pipelines. We can actually take a look at the reference platform by clicking through, and it gives some more information on this standard. Okay, so collections. There are now exporters. So collections can now specify their own exporters, making it easier to repeatedly export assets such as GLTF or USD for Studio pipelines. You can now export all collections with a single click via the file menu, and each collection can be exported to multiple file formats at once. Again, great for pipeline integrations, for getting content moved between softwares. Export settings are saved in the blend files for easy sharing and consistent use across Blender sessions. I like that as well, because being able to save the export settings in files means that you, as a studio, may be able to prepare a file that you can give to someone else, describe a workflow for them where they work on content or import content, and they don't have to take any extra steps to set up the exporter because you know the settings will be consistent with that file every time. More universal scene description. 4.2 adds support for importing and exporting hair curves and for importing point clouds. That's pretty useful. On import, meshes are validated by default. USD dome lights are converted into a weld shader, and there's a new option to let you import only defined prims. And there's some more information here about the export options. I don't tend to use USD too much because I tend to work more just in Blender all the time. I'm not really moving things between softwares or too worried about standardizing between different softwares, at least not yet anyway. I may have to extend my workflow for some future projects. But all this interoperability stuff is fantastic, and again adds to a lot of confidence for different company and studio environments. Oh, I didn't know about this. This is interesting. Takeaway. Blender has been portable since day one, but Blender 4.2 LTS takes it to another level. You can now bring your own configurations with you. Create a folder named Portable next to where you run Blender, then it will attempt to load or create settings in that folder first. That is very good. I need to try that because I've actually, ironically, just been setting up like a new standardization set of tools for myself. I've written a converter script where if I run it from a USB stick on any device, it will automatically set up my work directories, change the background, set up like batch files for uploading and downloading to the drive. And I was thinking about ways to incorporate Blender into this system, and that will help with it, particularly for migrating settings. So very good. I'm going to read up about that. Looks like they got a documentation page on it as well. Yeah, when running Blender from a portable drive, it's possible to keep the configuration files on the same drive to take with you. This is exactly what I was talking about. To enable this, create a folder named Portable at the following locations, next to the Blender executable. Amazing. Okay, well, that's a nice surprise for me. And it looks like that is kind of close to the end. Of course, there's always smaller things which didn't make it to the main page, which you can read through. I'm not going to read all of these, obviously, but the one I always warn people about is the Python API, because something always breaks, particularly if you're an add-on developer. And it looks like they've put this in bold as well here, breaking changes. So for the Python headed amongst you, this is an important one to pay attention to, and that will be it. So hopefully you've enjoyed this rundown. Please let me know if you've had experience with this version so far. How have you found it? Have you encountered many bugs? Is it a smooth ride for you? Have you had problems converting your previous projects into the new version? And of course, if you made it this far through the video, put an emoji in the comments so I can see if you did make it this far. My favorite is the unicorn emoji. Use it if you like, and I'll know who made it. And of course, feel free to subscribe and like this video. There's going to be more Blender content coming in the future relating to what you're making, what the Blender Studio are making, and what I'm making as well. And shameless plug, feel free to check out my Blender products and resources on curtisholt.online/store. I highly recommend Afterglow. It's the best thing I've made so far. No cap, as the kids say. It will really help you to get some amazing lighting setups with just such minimal effort. So feel free to check that out. But that's where we'll leave it. So thank you for watching, everyone. Have a fantastic day, and I will see you next time.